Reyna gathered the small pebbles in her palm, feeling their rough texture against her skin. Around her, the harsh landscape of Voithun stretched endlessly, a world of fire lakes, acid forests, and creatures that could kill with a single touch. A world where strength meant survival. A world where she had always been deemed useless. "Reyna!" The sharp voice of Lissa cut through her thoughts. "Stop daydreaming and get back to the shelter. The scouts spotted Harmonic Alliance ships entering our atmosphere." Reyna quickly pocketed the pebbles and hurried after the taller woman, her thin legs struggling to keep pace. At 16, she was small for a Deathworlder, her frame lacking the dense muscle and thick skin that characterized her people. In a society that valued physical prowess above all, her delicate build had marked her as worthless since birth. "What good are you in a war?" the elders would mutter when they thought she couldn't hear. Too weak to fight, too small to carry supplies, another mouth to feed with nothing to give back. The orphaned girl had spent her life trying to prove them wrong, but each attempt ended in failure. She couldn't wield the heavy plasma spears. She couldn't outrun the night beasts. She couldn't even withstand the acidic rain without severe burns, while other children played in it like a gentle shower. Now, as she followed Lisa back to the underground community shelter, the roar of Alliance warships filled the sky. The Harmonic Alliance, a coalition of civilized planets, had come to claim Voithon, as they had claimed dozens of other Deathworlds before. They called it integration, but the Deathworlders knew it as conquest. "They're bringing the singing tanks," someone shouted, as people rushed into the shelter. "The metal beasts that hum death!" Reyna slipped through the crowd, finding her usual corner near the ventilation shaft. From there, she could hear the conversations of the War Council in the adjacent chamber. "Their machines are unlike anything we've faced," said Morix, the defense chief. "Adaptive technology with sonic weaponry. They call them singing tanks because they emit frequencies that can shatter rock, rupture organs, or simply lull you into a stupor before they strike." "How many?" asked the gravelly voice of Elder Thorn. "At least 50, plus airborne units. They've established a base camp in the Silver Valley. Our scouts managed to disable 2 of their smaller units, but we lost 7 warriors in the process." The voices grew hushed, and Reyna strained to hear more. This wasn't the first time invaders had come to Voithon, but never with such advanced machinery. The planet's harsh conditions had always been their greatest defense. Magnetic storms that disabled navigation systems, atmospheric composition that corroded standard metals, predators that could sense the slightest technological disturbance. But the Alliance had clearly adapted. Suddenly, the shelter shook violently. Dust and small rocks rained from the ceiling as the sound of explosions echoed above. Panic spread through the crowd as a second, more powerful blast rattled the reinforced doors. "They found us!" someone screamed. "They're going to collapse the shelter!" Lissa appeared, her face grim but composed. "Everyone remain calm. We're evacuating through the eastern tunnels. Follow your assigned group leaders. Move quickly but orderly." As the shelter emptied, Reyna joined the stream of people heading toward the narrow escape tunnels. But halfway there, she froze. A distant sound had caught her attention. A strange, pulsating hum that seemed to bypass her ears and vibrate directly in her bones. Without thinking, she turned and slipped down a different passage, one that led to a small observation point near the surface. The observation point was little more than a crack in the rocky mountainside, reinforced with salvaged metal and covered with a transparent filter that allowed one to see outside without being seen. Reyna pressed her eye against it, her breath catching in her throat. Below, in the valley, stood one of the Alliance's singing tanks. It was smaller than she had imagined, about the size of 3 adults, but its sleek, silver surface gleamed with an otherworldly sheen. Most striking were the circular protrusions along its sides that pulsed with blue light in rhythm with the humming sound. As Reyna watched, the tank approached a massive boulder blocking its path, Instead of going around, it paused. The humming intensified, becoming a deep, resonant note that made Reyna's teeth ache. Before her eyes, cracks appeared in the boulder, spreading like lightning across its surface until the entire thing crumbled into gravel. Fascinated and terrified, Reyna continued watching as the tank moved forward. Its hum changed to a lighter, almost melodic pattern as it analyzed the terrain ahead. It was almost musical. Without conscious thought, Reyna began to hum along, matching the machine's tone. Her soft voice followed the rising and falling pattern, adding a counter-melody that felt instinctively right. As she did, something extraordinary happened. The tank stopped. Its pulsing lights flickered, then dimmed. The humming ceased, replaced by a series of clicks and whirs. For nearly a minute, the machine stood motionless, as if confused. Then, slowly, its lights returned to full brightness, and it resumed its path, though moving in a different direction than before. Reyna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Had she done that? Had her humming somehow interfered with the tank's systems? It seemed impossible. She was nothing, useless, as everyone had always told her. And yet, a hand grabbed her shoulder, yanking her backward. Lysa's angry face loomed over her. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Everyone's evacuated, and you're up here playing spy? Lisa, I saw one of their tanks. Save it, Lisa cut her off. We need to move now. The eastern tunnels lead to the Red Forest camps. Elder Thorn is gathering everyone there to plan our counterattack. As they hurried through the winding tunnels, Reyna's mind raced. If her voice had affected the tank, even momentarily, could it be weaponized? Could she, the useless orphan, actually contribute to their defense? But who would believe her? And even if they did, what good was a moment's confusion against an army of such machines? By nightfall, they had reached the Red Forest, a vast expanse of crimson-leaved trees, whose bark secreted a corrosive substance lethal to most off-worlders, but merely irritating to Deathworld natives. The forest offered protection, as Alliance soldiers would need specialized equipment to enter, and their larger machines couldn't navigate between the dense trunks. The camp was a hive of activity. Warriors sharpened weapons and applied protective oils to their skin. Healers prepared remedies for acid burns and sonic trauma. Children gathered food from the forest's safer areas. Everyone had a purpose, a way to contribute. Everyone except Reyna. She sat alone at the edge of camp, watching the twin moons rise over the forest canopy. In her hand, she rolled the pebbles she had collected earlier, their rhythmic clicking a comfort in the chaos. You should be inside the perimeter, said a voice behind her. Reyna turned to find a stranger, a man she didn't recognize from their community. He was tall, but thin for a Deathworlder, with a shock of white hair and pale skin that looked almost translucent in the moonlight. Most striking were his eyes. One brown, one a metallic silver that reflected light like a mirror. Who are you? She asked, instinctively backing away. Someone who's been watching, he replied cryptically. My name is Arak. I've been living in these forests for nearly a year. You're not from our settlement. I'm not from Voithan at all. He sat down beside her, his movements fluid, yet somehow mechanical. I used to work for the Alliance, designing their war machines. Reyna jumped to her feet, reaching for the small knife all Deathworlders carried. You're the enemy! Arak remained seated, his mismatched eyes regarding her calmly. Now I'm a deserter, hiding on the planet they sent me to help conquer. Ironic, isn't it? Why should I believe you? You shouldn't, necessarily. But I saw what happened earlier today, at the observation point. You hummed, and the tank hesitated. Reyna's knife hand faltered. That was coincidence. No. Arak shook his head firmly. It wasn't. Those machines, I helped design their sonic calibration systems. They operate on specific harmonic principles, using sound waves to analyze and manipulate their environment. Your voice, your particular vocal range and tonal quality, created a disruption in its processing. You confused it. Hope fluttered in Raina's chest, but she squashed it down. Too many disappointments had taught her caution. Even if that's true, what good is confusing one tank for a few seconds? Alone? Not much, Arak conceded. But, properly developed and amplified, you could potentially shut down entire squadrons. I'm not a weapon, Raina said, though the possibility of finally being useful sent a thrill through her. No, you're not. You're a key. Arak stood, towering over her slight frame. The Alliance believes they're invincible because their technology is superior. But every system has a vulnerability. You just happened to discover this one by accident. Why would you help us? Why betray your own people? Arak's silver eye gleamed in the moonlight. The Alliance wasn't always what it is now. It began with noble ideals, cooperation, shared knowledge, mutual protection. But power corrupts. They don't integrate worlds anymore. They consume them, extract resources, displace populations, erase cultures. I couldn't be part of that. He extended his hand, palm up. In it lay a small, disc-shaped device. This is a sonic analyzer. It can record and break down sound frequencies. If you're willing, I'd like to test your voice. See exactly what happened with that tank. Raina hesitated, then slowly replaced her knife. If I can help protect my people, I will. But I need to know more about these machines first. Arak nodded. Fair enough. The tanks, officially called harmonic terrain adapters, are semi-autonomous units designed for hostile environments. They use sound waves for everything from terrain analysis to offensive capabilities. The singing you heard was its systems working in concert. And my humming disrupted that somehow? I believe so. Each tank has a neural core that processes sensory input. Your voice may have created a feedback loop in its auditory systems. A glitch, essentially. Raina considered this, rolling the pebbles in her palm. If I learn to control it, to create this glitch intentionally, could I do more than just confuse them? Could I stop them completely? Arak's expression grew serious. Potentially, but it would be dangerous. You'd need to get close enough for the tanks to register your voice, which means exposing yourself to their weapons. I've been useless my entire life, Raina said, her voice hardening with resolve. If there's even a chance I can make a difference now, I have to try. Before Arak could respond, shouts erupted from the camp. They turned to see warriors rushing to defensive positions as Elder Thorn bellowed orders. Alliance scouts, 3 of them, approaching from the north. Raina and Arak hurried back to the camp, staying in the shadows. 3 Alliance soldiers in protective suits were being surrounded by Deathworld warriors. Their silver helmets reflected the campfire's light as they raised their hands in surrender. We come to negotiate, one called out, his voice metallic through his helmet's filter. Elder Thorn stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing the Alliance soldiers. There is nothing to negotiate. You invade our home, destroy our shelters, and then expect us to talk. The Alliance offers integration, not destruction, the soldier replied. Cooperation with the Harmonic Alliance means protection, technology, medicine. At the cost of our autonomy, Thorn interrupted. We've seen how other Deathworlds fare after integration, stripped of resources. Populations relocated to safer environments. Cultures dismantled piece by piece. That's propaganda. The Alliance respects indigenous. Enough! Thorn's voice boomed across the clearing. Return to your commander with this message. Voithon will never surrender. For every tank you send, we will destroy 2. For every soldier, we will claim 10. This is our world, shaped by its harshness, defined by our survival. We are not afraid of death. We embrace it as part of life. Can your alliance say the same?" The soldiers exchanged glances. Then the leader nodded stiffly. "We'll deliver your message, but consider this warning. General Maya commands this operation personally. She has never failed to integrate a target world, and she doesn't take defiance lightly. You have 3 days to reconsider before full tactical operations begin." As the soldiers were escorted back to the forest's edge, Raina turned to Arak. "Who is General Maya?" Arak's face had gone pale. "The Alliance's most effective military commander. Brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to the Alliance's expansion. If she's here personally, the situation is worse than I thought." "Why?" "Because Maya doesn't just conquer worlds, she breaks them. And she has a particular hatred for deserters like me." Later that night, in a small clearing away from the main camp, Arak set up his sonic analyzer. The device, no larger than Raina's palm, projected a holographic display that rippled with colored light as it detected sounds. "Start with a simple hum," Arak instructed. "Match this tone." He pressed a button, and the device emitted a low, steady note. Raina closed her eyes and hummed, trying to match the pitch perfectly. On the display, her voice appeared as a blue wave, flowing alongside the device's reference tone in red. "Good," Arak murmured, adjusting settings. "Now try a scale, low to high, steady progression." For hours, they worked through various vocal exercises. Arak recorded each one, analyzing the patterns and frequencies. As dawn approached, he sat back, rubbing his eyes. "It's your overtones," he said finally. "Most human voices produce overtones, additional frequencies above the fundamental note. But yours are unusually complex and occur in patterns that closely mimic the tank's operational frequencies. When you hummed along with that tank, your overtones created interference patterns that temporarily confused its neural core. Can I learn to control it, to make it more effective?" Arak nodded slowly. "With practice. Yes. But there's something else we need to consider." He hesitated. "The tanks aren't just machines. They're networked. They learn from each encounter, adapting their systems to overcome obstacles. If we use your voice too soon or too obviously, they'll adjust their frequencies to compensate." "So I get one chance," Raina said, her heart sinking. "No, you get one surprise." Arak's mismatched eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. "But we can make it count. If we can get you close enough to their command center, where General Maya coordinates the entire operation, you might be able to affect multiple units simultaneously." "How would we even get near their base? And wouldn't they detect me approaching?" "Not if we're careful. And not if we have help." Arak stood, pacing the small clearing. "I know their protocols, their blind spots. And I know something about Maya that few others do." "What's that?" "She's my sister." Raina stared at him, speechless. "Half-sister, technically," Arak continued, avoiding her gaze. "Same father, different mothers. We both joined the Alliance military young. Both excelled in our fields. I went into engineering, she into command. For years, we were the perfect example of Alliance excellence, the brilliant siblings bringing civilization to the savage corners of the galaxy." "What happened?" "Halcyon happened." Arak's voice hardened. "A beautiful Deathworld, like this one but with oceans that changed color with the tides. The native population was peaceful, advanced in their own way. They used sound for everything, communication, art, even medicine. Their entire civilization was built around harmonics." He paused, his silver eye reflecting the rising sun. "I was sent to adapt our sonic technology to their environment. During that time, I lived among them, learned from them. I began to see the beauty in their way of life, the wisdom in their connection to their world. And I saw what our integration would do to that." "You tried to stop it?" "I tried to modify the integration plan, to preserve their culture while still bringing them into the alliance. Maya disagreed. She saw their resistance to full integration as a threat, their attachment to their traditions as primitive stubbornness. Arak's hands clenched into fists. When negotiations broke down, she ordered a full military response. The singing tanks were deployed for the first time on a massive scale. They didn't just conquer Halcyon, they silenced it. Permanently. "They killed everyone," Reyna whispered, horrified. "No. That would have been too obvious, too difficult to justify to the Alliance Council. Instead, they used the tanks to destroy the harmonic points of the planet, the natural formations that created the world's unique acoustic properties. They silenced the color-changing oceans, shattered the crystal mountains that amplified the people's songs. They didn't kill the Halcyonites. They just took away everything that made their civilization unique." "And you left after that?" "Not immediately. First, I tried to expose what had happened, to bring Maya to justice. But she was already a hero to the Alliance, and I was just a technician with a conscience. So I sabotaged the next generation of tanks, introduced a vulnerability in their neural cores, and disappeared." His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Maya has been hunting me ever since. If she's here on Voithon, it's not just for integration. It's personal." Reyna absorbed this in silence, watching the sunrise paint the crimson forest gold. Finally, she asked, "This vulnerability you created, is that what my voice triggered?" "I believe so. I designed it to respond to certain harmonic patterns, ones rarely found in nature or technology. Your voice somehow produces those exact patterns naturally." "Then we have to use it," Reyna said firmly. "Not just to save Voithon, but to stop this from happening to other worlds." "It won't be easy. Maya is brilliant and paranoid. Getting close to her command center will be nearly impossible." "Then we'll need help." Reyna stood, her small frame suddenly seeming taller in the morning light. "And I know just who to ask." Convincing Lisa to trust Arak proved more difficult than Reyna had anticipated. The warrior woman listened to their explanation with increasing skepticism, her hand never straying far from her weapon. "So you expect us to believe that this Alliance deserter, who happens to be the enemy general's brother, wants to help us, and that our smallest, weakest member is suddenly our greatest weapon because she can sing at machines?" Lisa's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "I know how it sounds," Reyna said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But I saw it work. The tank stopped when I hummed along with it. And if you're wrong, if this is some elaborate trap?" "Then I die first," Reyna replied simply. "I'll be the one approaching the tanks. If I'm wrong, I'm the one who pays." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "And why would you take that risk? You've never volunteered for anything dangerous before." The words stung, but Reyna forced herself to meet Lisa's gaze. "Because I'm tired of being useless. Because everyone was right. I can't fight, can't hunt, can't even withstand the acid rain. But if there's one thing I can do, one way I can help protect our home, I have to try." A moment of silence stretched between them before Lisa turned to Arak. "And you? What do you gain from betraying your people?" "A chance to right a wrong," he replied quietly. "And they're not my people anymore. The alliance I believed in doesn't exist." Lisa considered them both, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "I'll take you to Elder Thorn. He makes the final decision. But I warn you now, if this is deception, your deaths will be slow and memorable." Elder Thorn's reaction was more measured than Lisa's, though no less skeptical. He listened in silence as Arak explained the tank's vulnerability and Reyna's unusual vocal ability. When they finished, he turned to Reyna. "Show me," he said simply. Arak set up the sonic analyzer, and Reyna demonstrated the harmonic patterns she had been practicing. The holographic display showed the complex overtones of her voice. their unusual configurations highlighted in bright red. According to my analysis, Arak explained, these patterns match the neural processing frequencies of the tanks. When they encounter these specific harmonics, it creates a disruption in their systems, like an auditory illusion that confuses their sensory processing. "And you discovered this by accident?" Thorn asked Reyna. She nodded. "I was just humming along with the tank's sound. I didn't know it would do anything." Thorn turned to a wizened woman beside him, the settlement's acoustic engineer, who designed their sonic warning systems. "Kira, is this possible?" Kira studied the holographic display, her fingers tracing the pattern of Reyna's vocal harmonics. "Theoretically, yes. Certain frequency combinations can create interference patterns in sensitive systems. If the Alliance tanks use harmonic processing as he claims, and if her voice naturally produces these specific overtones, it could work." "Could," Thorn emphasized, "not would or will. Nothing in war is certain." "Elder," Arak said. "But this gives us a chance. Perhaps our only one. General Maya's forces outnumber and outgun your warriors. Conventional resistance will fail." Thorn's weathered face remained impassive. "And your plan?" "We need to get Reyna close to their command center. Their tanks operate on a networked system. If we can disrupt the command node, we might affect all units simultaneously." "Suicide," Lisa interjected. "Their base will be heavily guarded." "Not from below," Arak countered. "The Fire Valley has cave systems that run beneath their position. The Alliance's scanners can't penetrate the mineral composition of those rocks." "The Fire Valley is home to the night beasts," Thorn pointed out. "No one crosses it and lives." "I've done it," Arak said. 3 times. The beasts follow predictable patterns if you know how to read them." A tense silence fell over the group. "Finally," Thorn spoke, his voice grave. "We face extinction either way. If there's even a chance this could work, we must take it." He turned to Reyna. "Are you certain you want to do this? The journey alone could kill you, even before you face the Alliance forces." Reyna thought of all the years she had spent as an outsider, useless and unwanted. She thought of the children who had mocked her, the adults who had pitied her, the community that had tolerated her only out of obligation to her dead parents. "I'm certain," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is my purpose. This is why I was born different." Thorn studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Lisa will accompany you, along with 3 of our best scouts. Arak will guide you through the Fire Valley to the Alliance base. You leave at nightfall." As the others dispersed to prepare, Lisa pulled Reyna aside. "I still don't trust him," she muttered, nodding toward Arak. "And I'm not convinced this isn't a waste of time that will get us all killed." "I understand," Reyna said quietly. "But I need you to trust me, even if you don't trust him." Lisa's hard expression softened slightly. "I've always trusted you, little one. I just never thought you trusted yourself." She squeezed Reyna's shoulder. "Get some rest. The Fire Valley shows no mercy to the weary." As twilight descended, turning the crimson forest to deep burgundy, final preparations were made. Reyna was given protective gear, thicker than usual to shield her sensitive skin from the Fire Valley's heat. Arak provided a small device to be attached to her throat, which would amplify her voice when activated. "This won't make you louder in the conventional sense," he explained. "It modulates your overtones to match the tank's processing frequency more precisely. Save it for when you're at the command center. It has limited power." The team assembled at the forest's edge. Reyna, Arak, Lisa, and 3 scouts, Tarn, Vex, and Kirill. Each carried minimal equipment, water purifiers, heat shields, and weapons specific to night beast deterrence. The journey through the Fire Valley should take approximately 6 hours. Arak briefed them. "We'll be crossing 3 distinct zones: the smoldering plains, the magma channels, and the crystal caves. Each has its own dangers. And night beasts? Tarn asked, checking his sonic disruptor. Most active in the crystal caves, Arak confirmed. They nest in the upper chambers during daylight and hunt the lower passages at night. We'll be moving through their territory during their most active period. Wonderful, Vex muttered. Elder Thorn approached, carrying a small pouch. For you, he said, handing it to Reyna. Kira prepared it. Sound crystals from the deep mines. They absorb and store harmonic patterns. When you return, we can use them to replicate your voice pattern if needed. Reyna accepted the pouch, touched by the gesture. For the first time, she was being given something valuable, something that acknowledged her worth. Thank you, Elder. Thorn nodded solemnly. May the rhythm guide your steps and the silence shield your passage. With that blessing, the traditional Deathworlder farewell, they set off, slipping into the darkening forest toward the distant glow of the Fire Valley. The smoldering plains lived up to their name. What had once been a vast grassland was now a perpetually burning expanse. The native fire-resistant vegetation caught in an endless cycle of burning and regeneration. Heat shimmers distorted the air, making distance difficult to judge. They moved single file, Arak leading, followed by Tarn, Reyna, Lisa, Vex, and Kirill bringing up the rear. The protective suits kept the worst of the heat at bay, but Reyna still felt sweat pouring down her back, soaking her underclothes. Step exactly where I step, Arak called back. The ground looks solid but can give way to ash pits without warning. For 2 hours, they navigated the treacherous terrain. Twice. They had to backtrack when their path was blocked by sudden flare-ups of intense flame. Once, Vex's foot broke through what appeared to be solid ground, plunging into a pocket of superheated ash. Only Kirill's quick reaction saved him from falling completely, though his leg was badly burned despite the protective gear. I can continue, Vex insisted, as Lissa applied a cooling gel to the injury. You'll slow us down, she replied bluntly, and attract predators with the smell of burned flesh. I'm not turning back, he said through gritted teeth. Lissa looked to Arak, who nodded reluctantly. We need every fighter we have when we reach the Alliance base. If he can walk, he comes. They fashioned a better seal around Vex's injured leg and continued, their pace slower but steady. As they approached the border between the smoldering plains and the magma channels, the landscape changed dramatically. The flat, burning expanse gave way to a network of deep trenches filled with flowing lava, separated by narrow stone bridges, barely wide enough for single-file passage. The bridges are stable but narrow, Arak warned. The real danger is above. Above? Reyna asked, craning her neck to look at the night sky, obscured by heat haze and smoke. Spark bats, Tarn explained, pointing to dark shapes flitting between smoke columns. They feed on the heat energy and the insects drawn to it. Normally harmless, but they're attracted to movement on the bridges. They dive, and their wings create electrical discharges. If they swarm, the electrical buildup can be fatal, Arak added. We need to cross quickly, but calmly. No sudden movements, no looking up. One by one, they began crossing the first bridge, a precarious span of volcanic stone no more than 2 feet wide, with a 40-foot drop to flowing magma below. Reyna focused on placing one foot carefully in front of the other, fighting the urge to look at the molten rock beneath her or the flitting shapes above. Halfway across, Kirill whispered urgently. They're gathering. Upper left quadrant. Don't look, Arak hissed. Keep moving. But the warning came too late. A dark cloud of spark bats descended, their membranous wings crackling with electrical energy. The air filled with a high-pitched keening as they circled the bridge. Don't panic, Lisa called. Steady pace. A bat dove, skimming inches from Reyna's head. She felt her hair stand on end from the electrical charge. Another swooped lower, its wingtip brushing Tarn's shoulder, releasing a small electrical shock that made him stumble. "They're getting bolder," Vex warned, swatting at one that flew too close. "Don't hit them!" Arak shouted. "It only—" His warning was cut short as Vex struck a bat directly, sending it spiraling into the magma below. The colony responded immediately, their keening rising to a frenzied pitch as they tightened their circle. "Run!" Lisa commanded. "To the other side! Now!" They abandoned caution, racing across the narrow bridge as the bats dove in earnest. Electrical discharges crackled around them, small but painful shocks striking their protective gear. Raina felt her exposed skin burning with each near miss, but kept running, her eyes fixed on the solid ground ahead. Tarn reached the end first, turning to help the others. Arak was next. Then Raina, practically throwing herself the last few feet. Lisa pushed Vex ahead of her, his injured leg slowing them both. Kirill brought up the rear, using his pack as a shield against the diving bats. Just as they reached safety, a particularly large bat struck Kirill directly between the shoulder blades. The electrical discharge was massive, a blue-white flash that illuminated the entire channel. Kirill convulsed, his body arching backward, then collapsed face first onto the stone. Lissa reached him first, rolling him over. His eyes were open but unseeing, his breathing shallow and irregular. "Neurological shock," Arak diagnosed, checking Kirill's pupils. "The electrical discharge affected his central nervous system." "Will he recover?" Raina asked, kneeling beside them. Arak's expression was grim. "Eventually, yes. But not in time to continue with us." "We can't leave him here," Tarn protested. "We can't carry him either," Lisa pointed out. "Not through what lies ahead." A tense silence fell, broken only by Kirill's labored breathing and the distant keening of the spark bats, still circling, but no longer attacking now that their prey had left the bridge. "I'll stay with him," Vex offered. "My leg is slowing us down anyway. When he's stable, we'll make our way back to the Red Forest." Lissa hesitated, then nodded. "It's the best option. Take the emergency beacon. If his condition worsens or you can't move him, activate it. The response team will find you." They left Vex and Kirill in a defensible position, sheltered by an overhanging rock formation that would hide them from aerial predators. With heavy hearts, but renewed determination, the reduced team continued deeper into the magma channels. 3 more bridges awaited them, each crossing tense but uneventful. The spark bats, perhaps satisfied with their earlier attack, kept their distance. By the time they reached the entrance to the crystal caves, Rihanna's legs were trembling with exhaustion, and even Lysa's stoic face showed signs of strain. "We'll rest here for 30 minutes, Arak decided, indicating a small alcove formed by cooled lava flow. "Eat, drink, check your gear. The caves are cooler but more dangerous." As they settled into the relative safety of the alcove, Rihanna found herself sitting beside Tarn, the youngest of the scouts. Like her, he had often been underestimated, his lean build and quiet nature masking his exceptional tracking skills. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly, offering her a strip of dried meat. Raina accepted it gratefully. "Terrified," she admitted. "Not just of the journey, but of failing. What if my voice doesn't work against the tanks? What if I've led everyone into danger for nothing?" "Fear is natural," Tarn said. "On a Deathworld, those without fear don't survive long. It's not about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear." "That's what I've never been able to do," Raina sighed. "Act despite fear. I've always frozen, always failed." "Yet, here you are, in the Fire Valley, heading toward an enemy that has technologies we can barely comprehend." Tarn smiled slightly. "That doesn't sound like failure to me." Before Raina could respond, Arak approached, his silver eye gleaming in the magma light. "We should practice while we rest," he said, sitting across from her. "The more precise your control over those harmonic patterns, the more effective you'll be." For the next 20 minutes, Raina practiced the vocal exercises Arak had taught her, focusing on producing the specific overtones that affected the tank's neural cores. The sonic analyzer showed her progress, the patterns becoming clearer, more defined with each attempt. Good, Arak nodded approvingly. You're a quick learner. Will it be enough? Raina asked. To affect all the tanks at once? Arak's expression grew serious. Honestly, I don't know. In theory, yes. If we can get you close enough to the command node, your voice, amplified by the device I gave you, should create a cascade effect through their network. But there are many variables, many things that could go wrong. Like what? Maya may have modified the tank since I left, potentially fixing the vulnerability I created. The command node might be better shielded than I anticipate, or the amplifier might not be powerful enough to affect the entire network. So it's still a gamble, Raina said, her heart sinking. Everything in war is a gamble, Lysa interjected, joining their circle. But some gambles are worth taking. She checked her timepiece. Rest period's over. We need to move if we want to reach the Alliance base by dawn. The entrance to the crystal caves was a jagged mouth in the rock face, its edges lined with translucent, multicolored crystals that seemed to pulse with inner light. As they stepped inside, the oppressive heat of the magma channels gave way to a cool, damp atmosphere that felt shocking against their overheated skin. Remove the outer layer of your protective gear, Arak instructed. It will restrict movement and make too much noise in the caves. They shed the bulky, heat-resistant outer suits, keeping only the lighter underlayers. Raina immediately felt more vulnerable, but also more agile, her movements no longer hampered by the heavy material. The caves are a maze, Arak continued, activating a small, holographic map projector. 3 main levels, with dozens of connecting tunnels. We need to reach the upper chambers on the far side, which lead to a fissure directly beneath the Alliance base. And the night beasts? Tarn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hunt primarily in the middle level, where we are now. They avoid the lower level, too close to the magma veins, and rarely venture to the upper chambers where the crystals are most dense. Their sensory organs are overloaded by the crystal's natural resonance. So we need to either go up or down, Lysa concluded. Down first, then up, Arak said, indicating the route on his map. The direct path through this level is too dangerous. They moved cautiously through the glittering tunnels, the crystals providing just enough light to see by. The beauty of the caves was breathtaking, walls studded with gems in every color imaginable, formations that had grown over millennia into fantastic shapes, pools of crystal-clear water that reflected the gleaming surroundings like mirrors. But beauty in a Deathworld was often a warning, not an invitation. The crystals, while stunning, contained trace amounts of radioactive elements. Extended exposure could cause sickness, or worse. The water, despite its clarity, was highly acidic, capable of dissolving organic material in minutes. We're approaching the descent point, Arak whispered after nearly an hour of careful progress. The tunnel narrows significantly, single file, and watch your footing. The descent was treacherous, a near vertical shaft with only small crystal protrusions as hand and footholds. One by one, they climbed down, testing each hold before committing their weight. Despite her exhaustion, Raina found the climbing easier than expected. Her small size and light weight, always disadvantages before, now allowed her to use holds that would never support the others. Halfway down, a distant howl echoed through the caves, a sound like metal being torn, followed by a series of clicking noises that sent chills down Raina's spine. Night Beast, Tarn breathed. Close. Keep moving, Lysa urged. Silently. They increased their pace, sacrificing caution for speed. When they finally reached the bottom of the shaft, they found themselves in a much larger tunnel, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. The air was warmer here, tinged with the smell of sulfur from the nearby magma veins. "The lower level is less labyrinthine," Arak explained, checking his map. "One main tunnel with fewer branches. We follow it for approximately 2 kilometers. Then ascend to the upper chambers." They set off at a brisk pace, the tunnel floor smoother than the level above. Despite the relative straightforwardness of their path, tension mounted with each step. The howls continued intermittently, sometimes seeming closer, sometimes farther away, impossible to pinpoint in the echoing caverns. After about a kilometer, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber. Unlike the crystal-studded passages they had traversed, this space was dominated by massive, twisted columns of black stone that rose from floor to ceiling, like the trunks of ancient trees. Between the columns, pools of bubbling mud emitted clouds of steam and the occasional belch of noxious gas. "The Pillars of Koth," Arak murmured. "We're making good time." "What created these?" Reyna asked, staring up at the towering formations. "No one knows for certain. Some believe they're the result of a unique mineral interaction with the planet's core. Others think they might be fossilized remains of ancient organisms. Whatever they are, they mark the halfway point of the lower level." As they picked their way between the columns and mud pools, Reyna noticed something strange. The distant howls of the night beasts had stopped. The silence, after hours of those eerie sounds, was somehow more unnerving. "Arak," she whispered, "why have they stopped?" Before he could answer, Tarn raised a hand in warning. "Listen!" They froze, straining their ears. At first, Reyna heard nothing. Then, faintly, a sound like dry leaves rustling against stone. It was coming from above. Slowly, as one, they looked up. Clinging to the columns, nearly invisible against the black stone, were shapes, sinuous, elongated bodies with multiple limbs and no discernible heads. Night beasts. At least a dozen, their skin shifting color to match their surroundings, only the slight movement of their breathing giving them away. "Don't run," Lisa breathed. Slow, deliberate movements toward the far exit. They're ambush predators. They strike at sudden movement. Step by excruciating step. They began to edge toward the chamber's exit. Reyna's heart hammered so loudly she was certain the creatures could hear it. Sweat trickled down her face, but she didn't dare raise a hand to wipe it away. They were halfway to the exit when one of the beasts shifted position, sliding lower on its column. A small shower of rock fragments fell, splashing into a mud pool with a soft plop. Everything happened at once. The night beasts dropped from their perches, their bodies unfurling in midair like deadly flowers blooming. Lysa shouted, "Run!" and shoved Reyna toward the exit. Tarn fired his sonic disruptor, the high-frequency blast momentarily disorienting the nearest creatures. Arak pulled something from his pack, a small, cylindrical device that he hurled into the center of the chamber. "Cover your ears!" he yelled as they sprinted for the exit. Reyna clapped her hands over her ears, just as a deafening boom echoed through the chamber. The concussive force knocked her forward, sending her sprawling onto the tunnel floor beyond the Pillars of Koth. Behind her, the night beasts shrieked in pain and confusion as the sound bomb, designed to overwhelm their sensitive auditory systems, did its work. Hands grabbed her, pulling her to her feet. Lisa, her face streaked with dirt, pushed her forward. "Keep moving. That won't hold them long." They ran blindly, following the tunnel as it curved and narrowed. The shrieks of the night beasts faded, replaced by the sound of their own labored breathing and pounding footsteps. After what seemed like an eternity, Arak called a halt. "Wait," he gasped. "Need to check location." They collapsed against the tunnel walls, chests heaving. Reyna's legs felt like liquid, barely able to support her weight. Even Lissa, with all her warrior's conditioning, was bent double, hands on knees, drawing ragged breaths. "Tarn?" Reyna asked, looking around. "Where's Tarn?" A heavy silence fell over the group. Lisa straightened, her expression grim. He was behind me when the sound bomb went off. I thought he was right behind us. He was covering our retreat, Arak said quietly. I saw him firing continuously as we ran. He didn't make it past the chamber exit. Reyna felt the world tilt sideways. Tarn, who had been kind to her when others weren't. Tarn, who had spoken of fear and courage. Gone. We can't go back for him, Lisa said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. The night beasts will have... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Reyna leaned against the tunnel wall, tears streaming down her face. First Kirill, now Tarn. How many more would die because of her? Because of this desperate mission that might not even work? I'm sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. If I hadn't... Stop, Lisa cut her off. Tarn knew the risks. We all do. This is a death world. Survival is never guaranteed. We honor his sacrifice by completing the mission, not by blaming ourselves. Arak, who had been consulting his map, looked up. We're close to the ascension point. Another half-kilometer. Then we climb to the upper chambers. Will we encounter more night beasts? Lisa asked. Possibly, but unlikely. They tend to hunt in specific territories. The ones we encountered were probably the dominant group in this section of the caves. They continued more cautiously, the loss of Tarn a heavy weight on their spirits. Reyna found herself listening for his quiet footsteps behind her, only to be met with silence each time. The ascension point turned out to be another vertical shaft, this one wider and less challenging than the descent had been. Natural crystal formations created a spiral pathway up the shaft walls, almost like a staircase, albeit one with irregular steps and no handrail. The upper chambers are less stable, Arak warned, as they began to climb. Seismic activity from the Alliance's heavy machinery has caused fractures in the cave system. Watch for falling debris. The climb was arduous, their already exhausted bodies protesting each upward step. Several times, small crystal fragments rained down from above, evidence of the instability Arak had mentioned. By the time they reached the upper level, Reyna's muscles were screaming in protest, and even Lisa moved with the stiffness of extreme fatigue. But what awaited them was worth the effort. The upper chambers were a wonderland of crystal formations, more spectacular than anything they had seen below. Massive geodes the size of houses, their interiors lined with amethyst and quartz crystals. Delicate crystal flowers that seemed to bloom from the walls and ceiling. Columns of pure, translucent crystal that caught what little light existed and transformed it into rainbow patterns that danced across the cavern walls. It's beautiful, Reyna breathed, momentarily forgetting their perilous situation. And deadly, Arak reminded her. The crystal density here is higher, which means higher radiation levels. We need to move quickly. As they navigated through the crystal forest, Reyna noticed something strange. The formations seemed to respond to their presence, emitting soft, musical tones when they passed close by. The effect was subtle at first, but grew more pronounced the deeper they ventured into the chambers. The crystals are singing, she whispered, awed. Resonating, Arak corrected. The crystals have natural harmonic frequencies. Our movement, our body heat, even our breathing, all create air vibrations that excite the crystal matrices. Lisa, always practical, asked, will the Alliance detect these vibrations? Unlikely. The mineral composition of these caves blocks most scanning technologies. That's why we came this way instead of over the surface. As they continued, the crystal song grew louder, creating a complex, ethereal melody that seemed to follow them through the chambers. Reyna found herself humming along unconsciously, matching her voice to the crystalline tones. Wait, Arak said suddenly, holding up a hand. He was watching her intently. Do that again. Do what? Hum with the crystals. Match their tones. Puzzled, but obedient. Raina hummed, finding the main note of the crystal song and harmonizing with it. To her astonishment, the crystals nearest her glowed brighter, their song intensifying in response to her voice. "Extraordinary," Arak murmured. "The crystals are responding to your specific vocal pattern, the same pattern that affects the tanks. It's as if—" "As if what?" Lissa prompted when he trailed off. "As if they're made of the same material," Arak finished, his expression one of dawning realization. "The neural cores of the tanks. They contain crystal matrices similar to these. It's how they process and generate sound waves." "You're saying the Alliance built their tanks using materials from Voithon?" Lisa asked incredulously. "Not intentionally. Perhaps. But yes. It seems likely that the crystal components came from this planet, or one very similar." Arak turned to Raina, excitement in his mismatched eyes. "This changes everything. If the crystals respond to your voice, it means the connection is even stronger than I thought. Your chance of affecting the tanks isn't just theoretical. It's practically guaranteed." For the first time since leaving the Red Forest, hope bloomed in Raina's chest. "So I can stop them, all of them. If we get you close enough to the command node, yes. And I think I know how to amplify your effect even further." Arak carefully broke off a small crystal from a nearby formation. "We can use these to create a resonance chamber for your voice. It won't just confuse the tanks, it might completely override their systems." With renewed determination, they pressed on through the crystal chambers. Arak collected specific crystal fragments as they went, testing each one against Raina's voice before adding it to his pack. Lisa, though still skeptical, seemed buoyed by this new development, her stride more confident, her vigilance never wavering. After another hour of careful progress, they began to feel vibrations through the cave floor, rhythmic tremors that made the crystals sing in discordant bursts. "Alliance activity," Arak confirmed. "We're directly beneath their base now." He led them to a narrow fissure in the chamber wall, barely wide enough for Lissa to squeeze through. Beyond it lay a vertical shaft that extended upward into darkness. "This leads to a maintenance access point at the edge of their perimeter," Arak explained. "It was created when they first set up their base, a ventilation shaft for their underground facilities. They've since upgraded to a more sophisticated system, but the shaft remains, forgotten in their schematics." "How do we climb it?" Raina asked, peering up into the blackness. Unlike the crystal-lined paths they had used before, this shaft was smooth metal, offering no obvious handholds. In answer, Arak produced a coil of thin, incredibly strong cable from his pack, with magnetic clamps at either end. One clamp attaches to the top of the shaft, the other to a harness. The cable auto-retracts, pulling the wearer up. "And if we're discovered at the top?" Lisa questioned. "The shaft opens in a blind spot between sensor arrays. We'll have approximately 2 minutes to move from the exit point to cover before the patrol passes." "And then?" "Then we make our way to the command center. The base is laid out in concentric rings, with the command center at the core. We'll need to cross 2 security boundaries, avoiding patrols and automated defenses." "And if we're caught?" Raina asked quietly. Arak's face hardened. "Maya doesn't take prisoners from Deathworlds. She considers the indigenous populations too unpredictable to process through standard Alliance protocols. She kills them," Lysa translated bluntly. "Yes, which is why we won't get caught." Arak began assembling a harness from components in his pack. "Raina goes first. I'll operate the cable. Lysa, you'll follow. Then me." Raina swallowed hard as Arak fitted the harness around her small frame. It was too big, designed for an adult, but he adjusted it as best he could, tightening straps and adding extra fasteners to ensure it wouldn't slip. "When you reach the top, stay absolutely still until your eyes adjust," he instructed. "Look for a red panel on the eastern wall. That's the manual override for the exit hatch. The code is 73914. Enter it, and the hatch will open silently. Wait inside the hatch enclosure until we join you." Reyna nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. This was it, the final approach to their target. After all the dangers they had faced, all the lives lost, they were about to enter the heart of the enemy's territory. A rack attached one magnetic clamp to the top of the shaft, where it stuck with a soft click. The other end connected to Reyna's harness. He pressed a button on the cable housing, and it began to retract, slowly lifting her off the ground. "Remember," he called softly as she rose. "Your voice is your weapon. Trust it. Trust yourself." The ascent seemed to take forever. The smooth metal walls of the shaft offered nothing to brace against, leaving Reyna spinning slightly as the cable pulled her upward. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes, until she began to see phantom lights and shapes in the blackness. Just as her nerves were reaching breaking point, her head bumped gently against something solid, the top of the shaft. She held perfectly still, as Arak had instructed, waiting for her eyes to adjust. Gradually, she began to make out shapes in the dimness, the circular outline of the shaft opening, and beside it, a faint red glow that must be the control panel. Moving with exquisite care, she reached for it, fingers finding the numbered buttons. 73914, she pressed, holding her breath. A soft hiss, and a section of the ceiling slid aside, revealing a small enclosure beyond. Reyna pulled herself up and into it, then pressed a button on her harness to release the cable. It zipped back down the shaft to bring up Lissa. The enclosure was cramped, barely larger than a storage closet. Metal walls surrounded her on 3 sides, with the 4th being the hatch door that would lead outside. A thin seam of light showed around its edges, the first natural light Reyna had seen in hours. Lissa joined her minutes later, her larger frame making the space even more confined. Together, they waited for Arak, listening to the faint sounds of the Alliance base outside, mechanical hums, occasional voices, the distinctive whine of engines powering up or down. When Arak finally squeezed into the enclosure with them, his face was tight with tension. "Change of plans," he whispered. "I monitored communications during the climb. The command center has been placed on alert. They detected unusual crystal resonance patterns in the caves." "They know we're here," Lissa hissed, hand moving to her weapon. "No, but they're suspicious. Patrols have been doubled, and they've activated additional sensor arrays. Our approach just got significantly more complicated." "What do we do?" Reyna asked. Arak thought for a moment, then reached into his pack. "We use their own technology against them." He produced 3 small devices, each no larger than a thumb. Harmonic disruptors. They're used by Alliance technicians to create safe zones when working on the tank's sonic systems. They emit a countersignal that blocks the tank's ability to detect sound vibrations within a small radius. "Will they work on the security sensors too?" Lissa asked. "To some extent. They won't make us invisible, but they'll confuse automated systems enough to buy us time." He handed one to each of them. "Activate them only when we're moving between cover. They have limited power, perhaps 20 minutes of continuous use." Arak pressed his ear to the hatch door, listening intently. "Patrol just passed. We have approximately 3 minutes until the next one. When we exit, head directly for the maintenance shed 20 meters to the right. Move quickly, but not frantically. Sudden movements attract attention." He pressed a sequence of buttons beside the hatch, and it slid open silently. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the metallic smell of machinery and the faint, chemical odor of Alliance fuel cells. One by one, they slipped out of the enclosure and into the night. The Alliance base spread before them, a sprawling complex of prefabricated structures, floodlights, and security barriers. In the distance, rows of the singing tanks stood silent and motionless, their sleek forms gleaming under artificial lights. They reached the maintenance shed without incident, crouching in its shadow as a patrol passed nearby. 2 Alliance soldiers in full combat gear, weapons ready. Once the patrol was out of sight, Arak consulted a small holographic display that showed the base layout. "The command center is here," he whispered, indicating a hexagonal structure at the center of the complex. 2 security cordons between us and it. The outer one is primarily automated, motion sensors and sound detectors. The inner one has live guards at all access points. "And once we're inside?" Lisa asked. "The command node, the central processing unit that coordinates all tank operations, is on the 3rd level. That's where we need to get Reyna." "And General Maya?" Reyna questioned. "Will she be there?" Arak's expression darkened. "Almost certainly. She never leaves the command center during active operations." They moved from shadow to shadow, pausing whenever patrols passed or sensor arrays swept their area. The harmonic disruptors proved effective, creating moments of sensor blindness that allowed them to cross otherwise impassable zones. But each use drained the device's power, the small indicators on their sides showing less and less remaining energy. The outer security cordon presented their first major challenge, a continuous barrier of energy sensors that detected any unauthorized movement across its boundary. Arak led them to a maintenance access point, a small junction box where the sensor field could be temporarily disrupted for repair work. "I can create a gap," he whispered, examining the controls. "But it will only last 30 seconds, and it will log the disruption. They'll know something crossed the barrier, even if they don't immediately know what." "Will they investigate?" Lisa asked. "Eventually, but procedure dictates they first check for system malfunctions, which gives us maybe 10 minutes before they send a physical team." "Do it," Lisa decided. 10 minutes might be all we need." Arak nodded and began manipulating the junction box's controls. After a tense minute of work, he whispered, "Ready. When I give the word, move straight across to that storage unit on the other side. Don't deviate. Don't hesitate. The gap will be exactly 2 meters wide." He pressed a final sequence, then hissed, "Now!" They darted across the boundary. Reyna first, then Lisa, with Arak following after a final adjustment to the junction box. The moment they were across, the sensor field reactivated with a soft hum. "Alarms?" Lisa asked tersely. Arak shook his head. "Not yet, but they'll have registered the disruption. We need to move." The inner zone of the base was more densely packed with structures and equipment. Alliance personnel moved between buildings, their silver uniforms reflecting the harsh, artificial lighting. Twice they had to freeze in deep shadow, as patrols passed within meters of their position. Once, they activated all 3 harmonic disruptors simultaneously to mask their heat signatures from a hovering sensor drone. Finally, they reached the inner security cordon, a physical barrier this time, consisting of a high fence topped with energy projectors that would deliver a lethal shock to anyone attempting to climb it. Guards stood at regular intervals along its length, and scanner gates controlled all access points. "We can't disrupt this one electronically," Arak murmured, "and our disruptors are nearly depleted anyway." "So how do we get through?" Reyna asked. In answer, Arak pointed to a large transport vehicle approaching one of the gates. "Supply delivery. They happen every hour. The scanning protocols for cargo are less stringent than for personnel." "We hide in the transport?" Lisa sounded dubious. "No. We create a distraction." Arak pulled a small vial from his pack. "This contains concentrated essence from the Fire Valley night beasts. To Deathworlders, it's merely unpleasant. To Alliance personnel, it triggers severe allergic reactions, nothing lethal, but extremely disorienting." "And when they're disoriented," Lisa pressed, "we use these." He produced 3 small discs. "Emergency transponder badges. All Alliance personnel wear them. These are programmed with low-level maintenance credentials, enough to get us through the inner cordon without raising immediate alarms." It was a desperate plan, with a dozen ways it could go wrong. But they had come too far to turn back now. As the transport vehicle passed through the preliminary inspection point and prepared to approach the main gate, they moved into position. Arak handed the vial to Lissa. "When I give the signal, throw this as close to the gate as possible. Then activate your transponder and walk. Don't run toward the gate. Act like you belong." When the transport was halfway through its inspection, Arak gave a small nod. Lisa hurled the vial with warrior precision. It shattered against a light pole near the gate, releasing a cloud of nearly invisible vapor. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The guards began coughing violently, some doubling over, others clawing at their eyes and throats. The inspection team abandoned the transport, stumbling away from the spreading vapor. "Now," Arak said calmly, activating his transponder. "Casual pace, eyes forward. Look annoyed but not suspicious." They walked directly toward the gate, transponders displayed prominently. In the chaos of the reaction to the night beast essence, no one questioned their presence or credentials. They passed through the checkpoint, the automated systems recognizing their transponders as authorized. The human guards, too, incapacitated to perform additional verification. Once inside the inner cordon, they quickly moved away from the gate, blending in with the general activity of the base. Alliance personnel hurried in all directions, many responding to the disturbance at the gate, none paying attention to three more figures in the general confusion. "The command center is there." Arak indicated the hexagonal building that dominated the center of the base. 6 entry points, all heavily guarded and requiring high-level credentials. "Which we don't have," Lisa noted grimly. "No, but there's a maintenance conduit that runs beneath the building, connecting to the environmental control systems. It's not on the official schematics, but I helped design the base template. All command centers have them as a failsafe." They skirted around the building, keeping their distance from the main entrances, until they reached a small, unmarked access panel near the base of the structure. Arak knelt beside it, examining the security measures. "Standard lock, but with a neural scanner," he muttered. "It's looking for specific brainwave patterns from authorized maintenance personnel." "Can you bypass it?" Lissa asked. "Not directly. No. But—" He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. "This is a neural pattern simulator. It can replicate the brainwave signature of the last person to use the access point. It's not perfect, but it might work." He attached the device to the scanner and activated it. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the access panel unlocked. "Quickly," Arak urged, swinging the panel open to reveal a narrow tunnel beyond. "The simulator's pattern will be flagged as anomalous within minutes." They crawled through the cramped maintenance conduit, the walls pressing in around them. The air was stale and thick with the smell of lubricants and circuitry. After what seemed like an eternity of claustrophobic crawling, they reached a junction where the conduit opened into a slightly larger space with multiple branching paths. "The central shaft is this way," Arak whispered, pointing to one of the branches. "It leads directly to the environmental control room on level 3, adjacent to the command node." As they moved into the indicated branch, a sudden alarm blared throughout the base, a piercing, rhythmic sound that echoed even in their hidden passage. "They've discovered the breach," Arak said, his voice tight. "We need to move faster." They abandoned stealth for speed, scrambling through the conduit as quickly as the confined space allowed. When they finally reached the end, another access panel, this one leading into the environmental control room, they could hear the sounds of activity outside: running footsteps, shouted orders, the distinctive whine of weapons being charged. Arak pressed his ear to the panel. "The room sounds empty," he whispered. "Standard procedure would be to evacuate non-essential personnel to secure locations during a security breach." "And the command node?" Reyna asked. "Adjacent to this room, through a connecting door. If we're lucky, they won't have had time to establish a full lockdown yet." Carefully, He pushed open the access panel and peered into the environmental control room. It was indeed empty. Banks of monitors and control panels stood unattended, their displays showing various system readouts. One by one, they emerged from the conduit. The room was smaller than Reyna had expected, crammed with equipment and with barely enough space to stand. Arak moved immediately to the main control panel, his fingers dancing across the interface. "I'm creating a diversion," he explained. "Simulating environmental system malfunctions in multiple sectors. It should draw attention away from this area, at least temporarily." Lisa positioned herself beside the room's main door, weapon ready. "How close does Reyna need to be to the command node for her voice to work?" "Ideally, inside the command center itself," Arak replied. "But that may not be possible now. The next best option is the primary ventilation duct that serves both this room and the command center. The acoustics are excellent. Her voice will carry directly to the node." He pointed to a large grate in the ceiling. "There. That leads directly to the main duct." Reyna stared up at the grate, doubt clutching at her heart. After everything they had endured to reach this point, success or failure now rested entirely on her voice, her one questionable talent, the ability that had never before been useful for anything. "I'm afraid," she admitted softly. "What if it doesn't work? What if I can't affect the tanks from here?" "Then we find another way," Lysa said firmly. "But first, we try this. You can do this. Reyna. I've seen your strength on this journey, strength no one, including you, knew you had." Arak nodded in agreement. "Your voice has power beyond what you realize. The crystal chambers prove that. Trust yourself." He removed the grate and constructed a makeshift platform from equipment cases, allowing Reyna to climb up and position herself at the entrance to the ventilation duct. From there, she could see down its length to where it branched, one path leading directly to the command center. "The amplifier," Arak reminded her, handing up the small device he had given her at the beginning of their journey. "Attach it to your throat, and use these as well." He passed her several of the crystal fragments he had collected in the caves. "Position them around you in the duct. They'll resonate with your voice, strengthening the effect." Reyna climbed into the duct, the metal cool against her skin. She arranged the crystals as Arak had instructed, then attached the amplifier to her throat. It adhered to her skin with a slight tingling sensation. "I've accessed their communication system," Arak called up to her, his voice tense with concentration. "I can see the command center through their security feeds. General Maya is there, along with her senior staff. The command node is active. They're preparing the tanks for a full assault on the Red Forest." "Now, Reyna," Lisa urged. "Sing now, before it's too late." Reyna closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing heart. All her life, she had been told she was useless, that she had no place in a world that valued only strength and resilience. But here, in this moment, her supposed weakness might be the only thing that could save her people. She took a deep breath and began to hum, softly at first, finding the resonant frequency that had affected the tank in the valley. The crystals around her immediately responded, glowing with inner light and adding their own delicate tones to her voice. Encouraged, she increased the volume, shaping her humming into a simple, haunting melody that rose and fell in precise patterns. The amplifier at her throat warmed against her skin, transforming her voice in subtle ways, enhancing the specific overtones that Arak had identified as disruptive to the tank's systems. Through the duct, she could faintly hear voices from the command center, confused questions, then sharp orders. "Something's interfering with the neural cores," a technician reported. "The tanks are showing anomalous behavior patterns." "Isolate the source," commanded a woman's voice, strong, authoritative, unmistakably in charge. "General Maya." It's everywhere," General, we can't pinpoint it. Reyna increased the intensity of her song, pushing her voice to new heights. The crystals around her blazed brighter, their resonance joining with hers to create a complex harmonic web that flowed through the ventilation system. In the control room below, Arak watched the security feeds with growing excitement. "It's working," he called up to Reyna. "The tanks are responding. Their operational lights are flickering." Emboldened, Reyna began to truly sing, not just humming now, but a full-throated melody that rose from deep within her. It was a song without words, a pure expression of determination and hope that carried all her fears, all her years of feeling worthless, and transformed them into something powerful. On the security feed, the command center had erupted into chaos. Technicians frantically worked their stations, trying to regain control of the tanks. In the center of it all stood General Maya, tall, imposing, her silver uniform gleaming under the emergency lights that had begun to flash. "Find the source of that sound," she commanded, her voice razor-sharp with fury. "Lock down all systems. Switch to manual override." But her orders came too late. On the external feeds, the rows of singing tanks had begun to power down, their pulsing lights dimming one by one like stars, blinking out at dawn. Some jerked erratically before freezing in place. Others simply went dark, their hum fading to silence. "It's a cascade failure," a technician reported, panic evident in his voice. "The neural cores are shutting down to protect themselves from the harmonic interference. We can't stop it." General Maya's face contorted with rage. She spun to face a secure console at the center of the room. "Initiate Protocol Omega," she ordered, pressing her palm against a scanner. "Authorization, Maya. General. Alpha 7 Delta." A warning klaxon sounded, different from the security alarm, deeper, more ominous. "Omega Protocol activated," announced a computerized voice. "Self-destruct sequence initiated for all harmonic terrain adapters. Countdown, 5 minutes. Arak's face went ashen. "She's activated the self-destruct protocol," he shouted to Reyna. "If the tanks explode, they'll take half the continent with them." Reyna faltered, her song wavering as fear gripped her heart. But then, in that moment of doubt, she remembered Tarn's words. "It's not about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear." Drawing a deep breath, she poured everything she had into her voice. The melody changed, becoming more complex, weaving in counter rhythms and harmonies that seemed to flow through her instinctively. The crystals around her vibrated so intensely, they began to crack, releasing bursts of pure harmonic energy into the ventilation system. In the command center, screens began to shatter. Control panels sparked and smoked. The neural interface that connected General Maya to the command node flickered and died. "Override failing," the computerized voice announced. "Neural core integrity compromised. Self-destruct sequence terminated." "Impossible!" Maya shouted, slamming her fist against the console. "Reactivate! Override authorization! Maya, General, Alpha 7 Delta." Unable to comply, neural network non-responsive. On the external feeds, the tanks remained dark and silent, not destroyed, but rendered completely inert. Their neural cores, unable to process Reyna's harmonic assault, had shut down entirely, severing all connections to the command node and preventing the self-destruct sequence from executing. Reyna continued singing, her voice growing stronger rather than weaker with each passing minute. The crystals had all shattered now. But it didn't matter. Her voice alone was enough, amplified by the device at her throat and carried through the ventilation system to every corner of the command center. Arak stared at the security feeds in awe. "She's not just shutting them down," he whispered to Lissa. "She's rewriting their core programming. She's singing them to sleep." Indeed, the data scrolling across the still-functioning monitors showed the tank's neural cores entering a dormant state, not destroyed or damaged, but peaceful, as if in a deep slumber from which they might eventually awaken, but not as weapons of war. In the command center, General Maya stood rigid with fury and disbelief. Around her, technicians and officers were collapsing, the harmonic resonance overwhelming their neural implants, standard issue for all high-ranking Alliance personnel. Only Maya remained standing, her superior implants filtering out enough of the harmonics to keep her conscious. "Evacuate the base," she ordered, her voice tight with controlled rage. "Full withdrawal. Priority 1, data only." She turned to a communications officer who was struggling to remain upright. "Send word to Alliance Command. Voithon, integration unsuccessful. Requesting reinforcements and Class A sonic countermeasures." But the officer had already slumped over his console, his neural implant overloaded by Reyna's song. General Maya was alone, her command center disabled, her tanks neutralized, her personnel incapacitated. And still, Reyna sang. Lissa touched Arak's arm, pointing to the door of the environmental control room. "Alliance soldiers," she whispered. "They're sweeping the building." Arak nodded grimly. "We need to get Reyna and go. The base's automated defense systems will be next. They operate on different principles than the tanks, but they won't stay offline for long." Lissa reached up into the duct. "Reyna," she called softly. "You did it. The tanks are neutralized. We need to leave now." But Reyna seemed not to hear, lost in the song that poured from her, like a river breaking through a dam. Her eyes were closed, her face transfigured with an almost unearthly calm. "Reyna!" Lissa called more urgently. "We have to go!" Slowly, Reyna's eyes opened. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if waking from a deep dream. Then, awareness returned, and she nodded, her song finally fading to silence. As the last note died away, the amplifier at her throat gave a soft buzz and went dark, its power depleted. Arak helped her down from the duct. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You stopped them all, even the self-destruct protocol." "The tanks?" Reyna asked, her voice raw from the extended singing. "Dormant, not destroyed, but sleeping, harmless." Arak's mismatched eyes shone with pride. "I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just disrupt them. You rewrote their programming at the most fundamental level." "General Maya?" Reyna asked, remembering the commanding voice she had heard. "Still in the command center, but isolated. Most of her personnel are incapacitated. She's ordered an evacuation." Arak checked the security feeds one last time. "We need to move now, while the confusion is at its peak. There's a service exit through the lower levels that should be clear." They slipped out of the environmental control room, navigating through corridors filled with disoriented Alliance personnel. Many were stumbling about in confusion, their neural implants affected by the harmonic disruption. Others lay unconscious, overwhelmed by the sound that had flowed through the base's ventilation system. As they reached a junction that would lead them to the service exit, a figure stepped out to block their path, a tall woman in a silver general's uniform, her posture rigid with controlled fury. "General Maya." "Arak," she said, her voice cold as space. "I should have known you'd be behind this." Arak stepped protectively in front of Reyna and Lissa. "Hello, sister. Still destroying worlds in the name of progress?" Maya's eyes, both natural, unlike Arak's, narrowed dangerously. "Still betraying your people for primitive savages? These savages have more humanity than the Alliance has shown in decades." Arak's voice was steady, but Reyna could see the tension in his shoulders. "It's over. Maya, the tanks are neutralized. Your base is compromised. Withdraw now, and no more lives need be lost." Maya laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You think this is the end? The Alliance has resources beyond your imagination. This setback will be analyzed, countermeasures developed, We will return, and Voithan will be integrated, along with every other Deathworld that dares resist. Her gaze shifted to Reyna, standing small but unbowed behind Arak. So this is your secret weapon, a child? Her lip curled in contempt. Remarkable vocal abilities. I'll grant you, our researchers will be fascinated when they dissect her. Lissa stepped forward, her weapon raised. You won't touch her. Maya smiled thinly, unimpressed. Brave, but futile. Even now, Alliance reinforcements are en route. This victory of yours is temporary at best. Perhaps, Arak conceded, but temporary victories add up, and each world that resists provides a template for others. He glanced at Reyna. Knowledge spreads. Resistance grows. The Alliance isn't invincible. She just proved that. Maya's hand moved to her sidearm, but Lissa was faster. A burst of energy from her weapon struck the wall beside the general. A warning shot. We're leaving, Lissa stated flatly. Stand aside. For a moment, it seemed Maya would refuse, would force a confrontation despite the odds. Then, with cold calculation replacing the anger in her eyes, she stepped aside. This isn't over, brother, she said as they passed. Not for Voithan, and certainly not for you. It never is with you, Maya, Arak replied sadly. That's your tragedy. They left her standing alone in the corridor, a solitary figure surrounded by the wreckage of her command. As they hurried toward the service exit, alarms continued to sound throughout the base, but the response was disorganized, ineffective. The command structure disrupted by Reyna's song. The journey back to the Red Forest was arduous, but less perilous than their outward path. With the Alliance forces in disarray and the tanks neutralized, the greatest dangers came from Voithan itself, the harsh environment that had forged its people into survivors. They avoided the Crystal Caves, taking a longer but safer route through the highlands above the Fire Valley. When they finally reached the Red Forest camp on the third day, they were met with disbelief, then jubilation as the news spread. The Alliance war machines had been defeated. Elder Thorn greeted them at the camp's edge, his weathered face split by a rare smile. The scouts reported Alliance ships leaving orbit, he said. We feared they were repositioning for a final assault. But you actually did it. Reyna did it, Lissa corrected, her hand resting proudly on the girl's shoulder. Her voice stopped every tank in their arsenal. Thorn looked down at Reyna, his expression shifting from satisfaction to something deeper, respect. Then Voithan owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Reyna. I just wanted to help, she said simply. To not be useless anymore. Useless. Thorn shook his head slowly. No one who witnessed what you've done will ever use that word for you again. In the days that followed, the people of Voithan emerged from their forest sanctuary to assess the aftermath. The Alliance base stood abandoned, its personnel evacuated, its equipment either destroyed or rendered inoperable by the harmonic disruption. The tanks remained where they had stood, silent, dormant monuments to a failed conquest. Arak worked with the settlement's engineers to study the dormant tanks, careful not to reactivate them, but learning their secrets to better prepare for the future. The Alliance will return, he warned. Perhaps not this year, perhaps not the next, but they don't abandon Deathworlds easily, especially now that Voithan has proven resilient. We'll be ready, Lissa promised. She had been appointed defense chief following the death of Morix in a skirmish during their absence. And we have a secret weapon they won't expect. That secret weapon found herself suddenly at the center of attention after a lifetime of being overlooked. Reyna was consulted on defense strategies, her unique abilities studied and documented. Kira, the acoustic engineer, worked with her daily, helping her understand and refine her vocal techniques. More importantly, the children who had once mocked her now looked at her with awe. The adults who had dismissed her as worthless now sought her counsel. For the first time in her life, Reyna belonged. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the red forest, she found Arak sitting alone at the camp's edge, staring at the stars. His silver eye gleamed in the moonlight as he turned to greet her. "Thinking of leaving?" she asked, noting the small pack beside him. He smiled faintly. "Am I that transparent?" "You've been restless since we returned, and you keep looking at the sky." Arak sighed, running a hand through his white hair. "Maya won't give up. She'll be hunting me specifically now, and by extension, anyone near me. The safest thing for Voithon is for me to draw that attention elsewhere." "You don't have to go," Reyna said, sitting beside him. "We can protect you, as you protected us." "Perhaps. But there are other Deathworlds facing Alliance integration. Other cultures at risk of being silenced, as Halcyon was." He turned to her, his expression earnest. "What you did, what you can do, it could help them too. Your ability isn't just a defense for Voithon, it's hope for all Deathworlds." Reyna absorbed this in silence, watching the moon's light filter through the crimson leaves overhead. "Are you asking me to go with you?" "No," Arak said firmly. "Your place is here, with your people. You've earned that belonging. But," he hesitated, "I am asking if you would be willing to teach others. If I find those with similar vocal potential on other Deathworlds, would you help them develop their abilities as you have?" "Of course," Reyna agreed without hesitation. "But how? If you're leaving?" Arak reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, similar to the sonic analyzer he had used to study her voice, but more compact, more refined. "This contains everything I've learned about your harmonic patterns. With it, I can identify others with similar potential. And this..." He produced a crystal, larger than those they had used in the caves, set in a simple metal housing. "This has recorded your voice patterns. It can serve as a teaching tool, a way for others to understand what they're working toward." Reyna accepted the crystal, turning it in her hands. In the moonlight, she could see complex patterns swirling within its depths. Her voice, captured in crystalline form. "You've been planning this from the beginning," she realized. "Since the moment you saw what I could do." "Not exactly," Arak admitted. "I hoped your voice could save Voithon. Yes. But its potential to help other worlds only became clear to me in the crystal caves, when I saw how the crystals responded to you. That's when I understood that what you have isn't just a quirk of biology. It's a connection to something deeper, something fundamental in these worlds the Alliance calls savage and seeks to tame." He looked up at the stars again, his expression distant. "The Alliance believes technology is the pinnacle of advancement, but you proved that there are powers they don't understand, connections they can't quantify or control. That's what really frightens them about Deathworlds, not the harsh environments or the resilient inhabitants, but the possibility that there are forms of advancement that don't fit their narrow definition of progress." Reyna considered this, remembering the feeling that had flowed through her as she sang to the tanks. Not just disruption or interference, but communication, connection. She had not destroyed the machines. She had spoken to them in a language more fundamental than words, had asked them to sleep, and somehow they had understood. "I'll help however I can," she promised. "Whenever you find others who might have this ability, send word to Voithon. I'll teach them what I've learned." Arak smiled, relief evident in his face. "Thank you. It won't be easy. The Alliance will be watching for anything resembling what happened here. But if enough Deathworlds can defend themselves as Voithon has, perhaps the Alliance will eventually reconsider its approach to integration." "And your sister, what about General Maya?" His smile faded. "Maya is the Alliance's most effective weapon against resistance. But she's also a symptom of what the Alliance has become, so focused on expansion and control that it's forgotten its original purpose of mutual benefit and respect." He sighed heavily. I don't know if she can ever change, but I have to try to show her another way, even if it means opposing her directly." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the moons traverse the sky. Finally, Arak stood, shouldering his pack. "You're leaving now?" Reyna asked, surprised. "Best to move under cover of darkness. The longer I stay in one place, the greater the risk to those around me." He offered his hand, helping her to her feet. "Besides, there's a settlement on the southern continent that's reporting Alliance scout ships in orbit. They may be the next target." Reyna impulsively hugged him. This strange man who had helped her discover her power, who had believed in her when no one else did. After a moment's hesitation, he returned the embrace. "Remember," he said softly, "your voice is not just a weapon. It's a bridge between people, between worlds, between ways of thinking. Use it wisely." "I will," she promised. "Be careful out there." With a final nod, Arak turned and disappeared into the forest, his white hair quickly swallowed by the darkness between the trees. Reyna stood watching long after he had gone, the crystal he had given her warm in her palm. When she finally returned to the camp, she found Lisa waiting for her, a knowing look on the warrior's face. "He's gone, isn't he?" Lisa asked. Reyna nodded. "To warn other Deathworlds, to find others who might have abilities like mine." Lisa snorted softly. "Good luck with that. You're one of a kind, little songbird." "Maybe," Reyna said, looking down at the crystal in her hand. "But maybe not. Maybe there are others out there who just haven't discovered what they can do yet. People who've been told they're useless their whole lives, like I was. If there are, I hope they find their strength as you found yours." Lisa's normally stern face softened. "I've fought many battles, killed many enemies, but I've never seen anything as powerful as your voice when you sang those war machines to sleep. It was beautiful." Reyna smiled, remembering the feeling of the song flowing through her, connecting her to the tanks, to the crystals, to the very heart of Voithun itself. It was, wasn't it? Not violence, not destruction, just harmony. "A strange weapon for a Deathworld," Lysa mused. "Maybe that's why it worked," Reyna replied. "Because it wasn't a weapon at all. It was communication, understanding." In the months that followed, Voithun began to change. Using knowledge gained from the abandoned Alliance base, they improved their technology while maintaining their connection to their harsh but beautiful world. The dormant tanks were carefully studied, then repurposed, their neural cores removed and replaced with simpler, mechanical systems that couldn't be affected by harmonic disruption, but also couldn't be used as weapons of war. Reyna divided her time between helping with these efforts and developing her unique abilities. Under Kira's guidance, she learned to control her voice with increasing precision, to target specific frequencies for different effects, to sustain her singing for longer periods without strain. Word spread to other settlements across Voithun, the story of the girl whose voice had stopped the Alliance's fearsome war machines. Some dismissed it as legend. Others made pilgrimages to the Red Forest to see for themselves. Gradually, a network formed, communications between previously isolated Deathworld communities, sharing knowledge, resources, and warnings about Alliance movements. 6 months after the defeat of General Maya's forces, a visitor arrived at the Red Forest settlement, a representative from the Alliance Council, not a military commander, but a diplomat, escorted by a small security detail that carried no heavy weapons. Elder Thorn received the diplomat in the community gathering space, with Reyna and Lissa at his side. The Alliance representative, a woman named Celine with the formal, slightly stiff manner of someone used to more civilized environments, presented their proposal with careful neutrality. "The Harmonic Alliance acknowledges the unique status of Voithun and its inhabitants," she stated, reading from an official document. "In light of recent events, The Council proposes a modified integration protocol, which would allow Voithon to maintain cultural autonomy while establishing limited trade and knowledge exchange with Alliance worlds. Thorn's expression remained impassive. And military presence? Would this modified integration include Alliance forces on our world? Celine hesitated before answering. A small contingent would be established, for mutual protection and to facilitate exchanges, but nothing on the scale of previous operations. And the neural technology? Lisa pressed. The singing tanks? Would they return as well? That particular technology has been reassessed for use on Deathworld operations, Celine admitted reluctantly. The Council has determined that alternative approaches may be more appropriate for worlds with Voithon's specific characteristics. Reyna studied the diplomat carefully. There was something the woman wasn't saying, something in the careful choice of words, the slight tension around her eyes. The Alliance is afraid, Reyna realized aloud. Not just of me, but of what I represent. The possibility that other Deathworlds might discover similar defenses against your technology. Celine's composed expression faltered momentarily. The Council's decision is based on a comprehensive evaluation of multiple factors, she said smoothly. Mutual benefit remains the Alliance's primary goal. A noble sentiment, Thorn observed dryly. One might almost believe it, if not for the evidence of previous integrations. He stood, his massive frame towering over the diplomat. Return to your council with this message. Voithon acknowledges the Alliance's proposal, but requires more substantial guarantees of autonomy. We are willing to establish limited trade relations, but no Alliance military presence will be permitted on our world. Knowledge exchange must be truly reciprocal, not extraction disguised as education. Celine looked as if she wanted to object, but thought better of it. I will convey your counter-proposal to the Council. One more thing, Reyna said, stepping forward. Tell General Maya that the tanks aren't destroyed, just sleeping. They can wake up if necessary. She'll understand what that means. The diplomat's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Maya's name, but she nodded stiffly. I will include your message in my report. After the Alliance delegation departed, Thorn turned to Reyna with a raised eyebrow. The tanks can wake up? Is that true? Reyna nodded. Aurak confirmed it before he left. Their neural cores aren't dead, just dormant. My voice put them to sleep, but it could also wake them again, with the right harmonic pattern. A useful piece of leverage, Lisa noted approvingly. Even if we have no intention of actually reviving those machines. It's more than leverage, Reyna said thoughtfully. It's a reminder that destruction isn't the only option, that there can be communication, understanding, even between worlds as different as ours and the Alliance's. Thorn studied her thoughtfully. You've grown wise beyond your years. Reyna, from useless orphan to the voice that saved Voithon. Quite a journey. Reyna smiled, thinking of all that had happened, all she had discovered about herself and her world. The journey's just beginning, she said. For all of us. That night, as the settlement celebrated the tentative victory represented by the Alliance's diplomatic approach, Reyna slipped away to the edge of the Red Forest. There, under the twin moons, she sang, not to disrupt or defend, but simply for the joy of it. Her voice rose clear and strong, carrying across the harsh landscape of Voithon, her Deathworld home. And somewhere in the crystal caves deep beneath the Fire Valley, something resonated in response, a harmonic echo that vibrated through the planet itself, a reminder that even in the harshest environments, beauty and connection could flourish. That strength came in many forms, that no voice and no person was truly useless.